Welcome, everybody. So it is my privilege to welcome tonight Master Nishigori Mitsumune, all the way from Ontario, way over on the West Coast. So thank you for joining us at 7 p.m. our time, but 3 p.m. your time?
Four. Wait.
4 p.m. your time. I can do that. So I wanted to say welcome, and I really wanted to say that in addition to the I Did a Thing challenge on Facebook, the goal of this webinar series is to seek skilled artisans and or morals to teach topics for a 45-minute to an hour Trimaris-centered arts and sciences session. These monthly Zoom classes are designed to establish consistency and support kingdom-wide arts and sciences engagement and more. The goal of this is to meet the challenge, each month that we have this, and then welcome our new speakers so that we can meet the challenges together, even when we're apart. And I'm very, very happy to have you here today. I'm so excited for this class, and I can't wait to hear all the tips and tricks about natural dyeing. So, without any further ado, Master Nishigori.
Alrighty. Thank you so much. So I'll get started. Just a quick note before I begin. Um, some time ago, there were some um, hard drive calamities that happened one after the other, and I lost most of my SCA classes, photos, papers, notes, research, etc. So a lot of this is cobbled together from what I was able uh, to recover, but it's in here. So feel free to ask. Just ask that you raise your hand or something. I'm not sure how it works on Zoom. Uh, um, if you have a question, and then I'll try to answer it. Um, and I might be jumping back and forth between different resources on the screen now and then. So we'll go with we'll see how it goes along.
And we actually
All
did
right.
have a question already. Really quick, will these slides be made available if asked, or will there be a handout?
Sure. This one that I have open here, I can give you the drive link and you can share away as needed. I'll make sure to set it so that anyone with the link can open it.
Hey, thank you so much.
Yeah. And I have a few other outdated. No, not the information is not outdated. Just um, not necessarily the exact thing I would like to present today are on there, but it's additional information that I can share. Yeah. So today I'm just going to go over the very basics. I'm assuming that I know that not everyone here is a beginner, but I'm just assuming for today's purpose that everyone is. If you have more advanced questions, don't worry about it. Just ask away. Okay, so I'm going to start at the very beginning, which is what are the main steps for the dyeing process. So always, whatever fiber you have, whether you have wool, silk, cotton, etc., you start with scouring. The process itself goes different depending on what fiber that is, but this is basically washing the fiber to make sure that certain natural and unnatural oils and dirts come away so that the dye can actually reach the fiber. If you do not scour, you are going to end up with, give me one quick second. Sorry. I want to actually have my samples next to me so I can reach them. That would be nice. You're going to end up with uneven. And can you all see my camera as well?
Yes, but I'm going to spotlight you right now so everybody can see it better.
Okay, I'm trying to find an uneven one that I had, but it's not right on top. So let's just say you're going to end up with really uneven and patchy color, or you'll end up with color that does not attach to the fiber at all. Okay, so I don't have the bad stuff right here. I just have the good stuff. Doesn't matter. What's important is we have the good stuff to show up. All right. So depending on the fiber, silk has a natural wax covering the fibers that are there to protect them called sericin, and that needs to be removed. Wool will have an oil covering the fibers called lanolin, which needs to be removed as well. Um, Cotton has a lot of chaff and dirt and other things. It doesn't necessarily have that those heavy oils on it, however, so it's a little easier. Um, but you need to remove all those. If you have commercially purchased wool, most of the time it'll be already thoroughly washed. I, however, always do a mild detergent wash anyway, just in case. It could have been sitting in a warehouse with dust settling it in it, people touching it. Even the oils from your hands are going to affect it. So you want to make sure your hands are nice and clean, and always make sure to keep anything, particularly oils, away from the fibers. Um, all right. Step number two is mordanting. This comes from the Latin word mordere, meaning to bite, and it is adding a chemical to the process which is going to attach to the fiber. So the biting comes from it, bites in, and then on the other end of the molecule, basically it attaches to the dye. So it more firmly attaches the dye to the fiber, so you end up with a dye and not a stain. Um, and this is something I also want to um, make clear. There's a difference between a dye and a stain. A lot of people will say, "Oh, can I dye with blueberries or black beans or etc.?" And oh, I can get a nice color from this flower. Yes, but that's a stain, not a dye. That will wash away. It'll be bleached away by the sun. It'll last from days to weeks and then be gone. And I'm going to show you some samples of the difference between what a dye and a stain will look like. Um, so, right. All right, I have a lot of samples to look through. All right, here we go. So if you look at my video, um, on the left, this is something that was this color, or it's not showing up very well on my camera. Here we go. There's one that shows up better. This color before time passed. But this is a sample which is a stain, and it's been sitting in a box over, I don't know, a few years, and it has basically lost all the color. And on the bottom, you have a dye. It's been sitting there for the same amount of time, and it's just as bright as the first day when it was dyed. So there's the difference between a dye and a stain. Stains fade over time. Dyes, well, they do a little bit, but not nearly as fast. They last much, much longer. Um, there are some exceptions to the way we talk about that. Indigo is a whole different process. I'm not going to get into indigo because it's it's a completely different process of dyeing from the general dye. So I'm not really going to get into that. All right. So that's mordanting, and with mordanting, there's two types of. Let me see if I think I get into it more. Yeah, I'll get into that more specifically. All right. Step step three rather is the dyeing. That's exactly what you're doing. You're putting the fiber now into the pot that has all of the dye stuff, and you're going to end up with a color. And then rinsing. You always rinse in the end to get rid of extra dye, to get rid of the extra mordant, other stuff, and to get it ready to use. A couple of other notes. One, it's always preferable when possible, and it's not always possible, to dye on the spun yarn, right? So that's the preferable method. And that's going to give you the brightest, most lasting color on the fiber. The second preference is dyeing on the cloth, right? There you go. It's something that's dyed on cloth. And then let me turn off this background so you can actually see what I'm holding up. One second. Sorry about that. Not there. Sorry for the mess behind me, but all right. All right. So preference number one is on the yarn. Preference number two is on the fabric, and number three would be on the raw material. The reason is that this is very wasteful. There's actually, if you take a thick yarn, particularly, it's going to be very wasteful. If you take a thick yarn like this and you cut it in half, you're going to find that the very center of it doesn't have a lot of color. Which why would you want it to? It's not on the surface, it's not going to be visible. I saw a comment there, wow, what a difference. These are um, different dyes. I'm just showing kind of on the fabric, silk takes color very good um, on the fabric itself, particularly the finer fabrics are going to take the color better. Um, See a comment there, dyeing in the wool roving makes it harder to spin. Yes, that's true. Um, Depending on the dye, particularly, it's going to make it harder to spin. It's going to make it way more. It's just better to do it at the yarn level. And then what you never want to do, and this is almost 99% of the time you should not do this, is dye the garment already constructed. You're going to end up with uneven colors. You're going to end up with dye not penetrating in areas where you have stitching. You're going to end up with sometimes uneven shrinkage. It's just not a good idea to do that. The only time you're doing that is if you're hiding some stains, and then so you're re-dyeing it, and it's something that's not meant to be like a fancy garment. It's then it's fine, but I've tried it multiple times and it's never worked out. It's always some problem, even for kind of just work around camp items. It looks terrible. Don't do it. All right, let's go back into the slides. Scouring. So for scouring, okay, another note, I'm going to use this term a lot, WOF, that means weight of fabric. A lot of time in dyeing, we measure not in specific, say, grams or ounces or what have you, but in percentage weight of the fabric. So if the fabric you're dyeing weighs, 10 ounces and you say 10% WOF, that means use 1 ounce of whatever you're referring to. So yeah, as I said here, I'm not going to go to the exact quantities or anything. There's different commercial soaps that I recommend. Orvis and Eucalan are the ones that I tend to use. These work very well for wool and silk. They'll work just fine for cotton, but cotton can take harder soaps as well. I've also used in the past goat's milk soap made by someone in Trimaris, and that has worked quite well. I prefer using those for the rinsing step at the end because it seems to get rid of extra dye, etc. very well. I'm not going to go too much into that. Okay, so mordants. Let's dive deep a little bit into that. I already went into what mordants are, but what are some of the common substances that we use? Almost always, with one exception, you're going to have metal salts. And chemically speaking, these are metal salts. So it's a salt of some metal ion. Usually you want aluminum, or depending on the circumstances, you might have things like iron, copper, or tin. I don't mess with anything more toxic than that. Copper and tin are already questionable because they are, while not extremely toxic, they do require very very specific ways to get rid of the fluid so that you don't end up breaking laws. So I try not to use those wherever possible. And then the other substance that can be used are tannins. So tannins are what makes your tea brown, what makes your coffee brown. It's what makes dark, murky rivers that brown color. It's used to tan leather. It's used to make ink, and in some cases, it's used to dye on its own. It gives a brownish, deep brown color when used in very high quantities. But tannins are very, very large molecules. So if you see the background of the slide here, that's one of the smaller tannin molecules. And because it's heavy, it's going to add a lot of weight to the fabric itself when you use it. But it is necessary to use a two-step tanning process, rather mordanting process, when doing dyeing on vegetable fibers. So we're talking linens and cottons. We need to use first tannins and then the metal salt. Um, where people could get the chemicals, I'm going to get into that in a sec. But just very important, you're going to hear people talk about chrome mordants. Do not even think about it. First, it's not period. Second, it is extremely toxic. Like I will not go within, you know, 10 feet of of chrome. Just do not even think about it. It's extremely toxic. It lasts in the environment forever. It causes extreme damage to the environment, and you can get severely poisoned. Just even if it's Chrome 3, which is the less toxic version, don't even think about it. Just stay away from it. Unless you're a commercial dyer with very specific safety concerns, just don't. All right. Even if you hear people talking about it, don't even think about Chrome. Okay, where people in Pureit got these things. So that's where these funny names for this are, right? So I would call this first one potash, alum, potassium, aluminum sulfate. What people actually use right here is a stone called alum, thus the name potash alum, and that's where the name for aluminum comes from. It's this alum. This is a stone that can be dug up from the earth. It is mostly composed of exactly that potassium aluminum sulfate. Sometimes modern dyers will use potassium aluminum, um, hold on, acetate, which you can make from alum, but it's not. I'm not convinced it's period. Let's put it that way. And alum does a good enough job on its own. So why not use it? You can buy this at any supermarket where they have pickling supplies because it's also used to make pickles. It's an astringent, so that puckering feeling in your mouth when you eat certain things, certain things like persimmon. That could be due to either tannins or alum causes the same thing. Both are kind of the same, um, not kind of, not in the same family of chemicals, but they have similar effects. So alum is used a lot in foods. You should be able to buy bags of powder, or you could find it in the rock form. Um, okay, so I'm gonna give actual weights of fiber here in the recipes. However, put an asterisk next to that because I have watched traditional dyers in South America who have been dyeing with the same oral recipes for time immemorial, have been doing the same way for 4,000 to 5,000 years. And what they do is they grab a rock of alum and they just throw it into the dye pot. They grab a rock of iron and they just throw it in there. That's it. They don't measure. They don't care about the weights, and that's how I do it now. I don't follow these. I would say that these are minimums, if you want to think of them that way. Um, I simply have the pot of water. I know how much I'm dyeing, and I kind of eyeball it and throw in some alum or whatever in there, and that's good enough. For the dye stuff, don't do it that way. But for the mordants, yeah, I measure with my heart at this point. I know how much is too little just by feel, and then doing too. There's no such thing as doing too much. No excess of alum is going to attach to the fiber. It's all going to rinse out afterwards if you have too much. So I don't worry about it. So that's what I go with. Just jumping back for a second. Okay. So the point of the mordant is not just to attach the dye to the fiber, it also brightens the color. So there are some dye stuff that you don't need a mordant for. It'll attach on its own to the fiber. Most wood-based dyes are like that. And a lot of the grain dyes, grain doesn't mean grain as in plant grain, it means a dead insect. So a lot of the grain dyes are like that, and I'll get to those types of dyes later. But if you add a mordant, it brightens the color. Now, uh, there are other mordants that we use that quote unquote sadden the color. That doesn't mean it's worse. That means it gives you a color that's less towards the warm reds and yellows, and it pushes it towards the blues and greens. And in some cases, you want that, right? So uh, let me show you an example that will show you that that saddening doesn't mean making it ugly. Here we go. So here's some silk with the same yellow dye. On the yellow here, this is with alum, and this chartreuse is with iron. So it gives it, the camera's not capturing it very well, but these are very bright, both of them, like almost highlighter yellow and highlighter green. So it's not making a sad color, it's making a different color. It's just in dyeing parlance, we say sadden to mean push it towards the green and the blues rather than towards the reds and the yellows. And the main mordant that's used that is in period it was called copperas, which is iron sulfate. So this is a bluish substance right here, which it's like a bluish green. It's again, it's found naturally in nature. Often today, it's taken out of mining runoff. So when they're mining for iron, this is going to be one of the byproducts. And so instead of wasting it, you can use it. So in areas where, say, you have a stream cutting through an area that has a lot of iron in the ground, so a lot of ochres and other iron-rich deposits. If it pools, you'll end up forming these sulfates very often. If you have sulfur in the water, then you end up with these, and they deposit out, and people would gather them and use them. Usually, when you find them in nature on the ground itself, they'll be a yellowish color, and they have different names and different cultures, but it's the same thing. And this is the kind of thing where I've seen people in South America also just grab the rock, forget what they call that one. It's alumbre, and I can't remember exactly. And they just throw it into a pot. That's it. Leave it. And this is going to push those yellows into those olive greens, like I showed, those reds into purples and browns, because you're mixing in those greenish and bluish tones. One thing, this is one where you definitely don't want to use too much. If you use too much on an animal fiber, like particularly on wool, it will eat away at it and it can disintegrate on you. Like it will literally just fall apart. So definitely don't overdo it. Ask me how I know. I have, yeah. So even if you use a lot, it's not going to disintegrate immediately. It's over time. So you just want to, whenever you're using iron, you want to rinse it very, very well. So that's going to make sure that any excess iron, it's going to move out. Definitely use soap when you're rinsing anything with iron, because that's going to help you remove all that excess iron. It's going to smell like pennies, and you just, yeah, once it stops smelling, then you're good. One thing about mordants that I'll mention now, I almost use co-mordants, which is where you put the or pre-mordants. So where you prepare the fiber before the dyeing. So you put the fiber into a pot with alum, with iron, whatever it might be, and then take it out and then put it into the dye pot, or put the alum, iron, whatnot into the dye pot, and then do both at the same time. You're dyeing and uh, mordanting at the same time. So that's a cold mordant. The other one's a pre-mordant. I don't very often, but you can do a post-mordant where you put everything into a dye pot, then take it out and put it the into the mordant pot. That's going to give you less bright but more subtle shades. Sometimes you want that. You're trying to achieve a particularly subtle shade, then you're going to do that. Um, I'm usually going for brightness. So that's not what I'm usually going for, but that is something you can do. You can also dye with one mordant, say alum, make it bright. Then after you take it out of the dye pot, very quickly dip it into iron and pull it out. And that's going to shift the color towards the sadder, quote unquote, to the bluers and the greens. But it won't completely take it that way. And you still have it well attached to the fiber, so it's still bright, but then you shift the color. And that's called a post-mordant. All right, copper is the next one. That's the most toxic thing I'll use. You'll usually find this at any chemical supply provider, even Amazon, as copper sulfate. This would be the same way found in nature as I mentioned for iron. It's going to be found near iron deposits, usually where you have a water flowing past, and sulfate-rich waters are going to create a runoff of this copper sulfate. This one is toxic. Um, this one you cannot just get rid of down your sink in most municipalities, so don't do it. For this one, you would have to use eye protection, use gloves. With iron and alum, I just stick my hands in the dye pot. It's not a problem. Not with copper. Copper, you want to use gloves. You want to use a mask and eye protection. You don't want to breathe in those fumes. You want to do it outdoors. And at the end, you're going to want to you can dispose of it in your garden. Actually, some plants like the copper, but check your municipality, local municipality, to see how you should dispose of this. I won't tell you how. Just look up for your local municipality how they say, because do not dispose of it anywhere near a natural habitat, natural aquatic habitat that has crustaceans in it. So anywhere where shrimp, crabs, etc. lives, copper is toxic to them. It kills them. So do not. I strongly recommend not doing copper unless you're very advanced. You know exactly what you're doing and what you're going to do with that pot of water, where you're going to dispose of it, and how ahead of time. All right. Now we're going to go into individual dye plants. So now that we got over the background, now we can jump into the actual fun stuff. Here I have a picture of the dye stuff, usually on the top, and on the bottom I'll have a picture of some of my my samples, and I can also show you some samples here. So in Europe, and actually all throughout Eurasia, you would have used for yellow. The most common would have been weld. This is considered a weed nowadays. It grows wild. It's considered invasive in some parts of the Americas. So, just double check before planting it. But you can buy it in dried form, and it works very well in that dried form. It gives very deep, buttery yellows, and it dyes much better in wool and silk than it does in linen and cotton. So down here in the bottom, you see, I think that's cotton and linen on the left, and then wool on the right. So it's going to give you much brighter colors than wool. And it loves chalk. So whenever you're using weld, you're going to add a little bit of chalk to the dye pot. And this is calcium carbonate. It's chalk. You just get a piece of chalk and grind it down and throw it in there. You can buy it powdered. You can grab a Tums tablet and throw it in there. It's all calcium carbonate. It's all chalk. It's going to do the same thing. Um, all right. So that's weld. And it's just going to be period for anywhere in Eurasia, uh, probably Africa, North Africa as well. Okay, matter. There's going to be a species of matter that you can find literally anywhere in the world. So this is period for anywhere. It's an entire family of plants. Um, most of them will have the genus name Rubia, but not all of them. They are all in the family Rubiaceae, which means red. So there you go. It's the color of the plant itself tells you what color they got from it. It has You're not dyeing with the leaves or the stems. You're dyeing with the roots. The roots are very orangey red. You can find a lot of these growing wild in most places in the U.S., but those are not going to give you the best color. You want to go for specific um, species if you want the brightest color. And those are Rubia tinctorum, which is native to Europe, cordifolia, which is native to India, and citrifolia, which is native to East Asia. Um, there is another species in the Americas. That's the one that was used historically for dyeing. I don't remember the name of it, but there's going to be one anywhere. And the dye stuff, the chemical itself is going to be the same. So a note about matter. Matter can give you anything between pink, red, purple, and orange, depending on how you treat it. So anything with a red shade to it, you can get out of matter. Usually you're trying to get red. Um, you're going to have difficulty. And usually to get, like, say, my t-shirt, a bright primary red, you're going to have to mix different dyes to get that. This is more of an orangey, rusty red. And in fact, our definition of red has shifted over time. This is what would have been referred to as the word red in period. Once the Turkish method for dyeing this bright primary red was brought into Europe, and some uh, technological changes happened, then the idea of red became brighter, more primary shade. That was very difficult to achieve in a natural dyeing method before those times, and it involves dyeing with tin and some other stuff that we won't get into that. So if you look at period dyed garments, like in museums, are going to be that rustier red, that orangier red, and that's from madder. Or if they're more purple, they're from one of the green dyes, one of the bugs. Okay, so how to get the different colors with madder. If you want oranges or very orangey reds, you boil the crap out of it. And that's going to take out, so it's going to remove from the root both um, the red dye stuff and a lot of oranges and browns, so tannins and other things that are going to shift it towards the orange. If you want just the reddest you can get with madder, you do not go over 80 degrees centigrade. And I use Celsius. Sorry, Fahrenheit people. It's Celsius for me. So you can check on your thermometers what that means in Fahrenheit. I have no idea. I don't use Ceph. So AC, you don't want to boil it. If you're boiling it, you're going to get an orange color. But that's not necessarily bad. Okay? So you're going to get an orange color. The great thing about madder is that it's slightly pH sensitive. So if you add lemon juice, citric acid, vinegar, you're going to shift it towards the pinks and fuchsias. If you add soda ash or some other base, you're going to shift it towards the purple. It's not going to be as extreme a shift as you're going to get from other dye stuff, but it's going to affect the color. Um, Yeah, so that's the thing. If you want really red, don't go over 80C. Okay, why do I have that again? Here we go. Okay, grain dyes. So these are the bugs. So when we say grain, mean different types of insect, and these are called scale insects. They don't look like insects; they look like little grains, and they are because they are only the female of the species, which attaches itself to a plant, loses its legs, and everything that makes it look like anything but um, a scale on the plant, and it starts feeding on the juices of the leaves or of the uh, whatever part of the plant it's feeding on. And the great thing about that though is that it never moves and it continuously collects dye molecules over its life. So once, if you pick one up off, and these are literally thousands of species of these. If you ever see one on a tree, pick it up and squish it, and what you see is not blood. It's dye stuff. And if you have prickly pear growing and it starts getting scaly, don't get rid of the prickly pear. That's cochineal. That stuff is the best. All right. So in period Europe, Asia, Africa, you would have used carmine or vermilion. So carmine is one scale insect which comes from Eastern Europe and the Caucasus. It was used so much that it is almost entirely gone. I know of only two locations that still have it growing and or living rather, and there's remote forests in Poland and one valley in Armenia. It is, when I say here fantastically expensive, I'm talking about thousands of dollars per gram. So you won't be using carmine. Vermilion is another one. That's Kermes vermilio. So a lot of the words for red come from this Kermes, carmine, vermilio, vermilion, etc. It's only from Persia nowadays, also extremely expensive, although not quite as much as real carmine. In fact, carmine I've only ever found one place that sells it, and like, yeah, it's you're not going to be able to find these. Lac, however, was much more sustainably sourced in the places where it is native to, which is mostly in North Africa. Actually, yeah, I think North Africa and India. It's a lot more widespread, and therefore more sources of it can be found. And here you're not dying with the insect itself, but the insect, as it feeds on plants, it emits a resin. So it looks like a tree sap, but it's not, which is called laca. So this is lac. This is the exact same substance as is used in lacquer, as in lacquering wood. It is used for many, many different things. And it was used in period for many different things. It's still used today. It's relatively easy to find, and you can dye with it as well. Um, it's also quite expensive, but it's not going to break the bank. However, what you're probably going to be using is cochineal. It's this barely period for Europe and anywhere outside of the Americas. It is extremely period for the Americas. This comes from the prickly pear. It's the one that you can find growing in many parts of the U.S. Anywhere south of, the tree line, you can probably find it on a prickly pear. Um, I've had these spontaneously show up at my house, much to my happiness. When we were in Florida, probably much more unlikely to show up to the prickly pears we have growing here in Oregon, but you can always hope. Um, the the majority of what you're going to be able to find, you can find it by the pound to buy it, and it's not. It's more expensive than other dye stuff, but you need so very little of it that it doesn't really matter. So you're always going to use a very tiny amount. Here we're talking about like 3 to 5%, even less of the weight of the fiber. Whereas normally you're using 50, 20, 100%, 200% of the weight of the fiber sometimes for other dye stuff. Yeah, so great stuff. Grain dyes are highly pH sensitive. With these, you can get extremely bright purples and fuchsias and extremely bright reds. Let's see if I have some here to show you. This one, oh, this actually madder. I can get, it's about the reddest I can get out of madder. This is with cochineal. Let's see. Oh, no, stuff here. Still have not unearthed all of my dye samples from the movie, but you can see when we're playing with shifting the color, you can get purples and pinks out of it. You can get some pretty cool shades. That's madder. This is with cochineal, so very bright reds. And let's compare it to, see, on the larger here is madder, and then cochineal has a pinker shade, madder has a more orange shade. And with cochineal, we'll generally get a brighter shade as well. This is cochineal shifted all the way to the purple. So yeah, you can get some very bright and interesting colors with the grain dyes. All right, I'm just going to go very quickly over the indigo dyes, which is not all indigo, but so these are blues and purples that you're going to get from this family of dyes, but it's a whole completely different dye process because you have to go through a chemical process called reduction to be able to access the dye stuff in the form that you need it to attach to the fiber. So you have to create what we call a vat. You have to allow it to reduce by various noxious methods that involve stale urine and rotting fruit and other unpleasant things. And then you can get that lovely blue. And then hopefully wash all of the smell off of it. Then there's one other extremely inaccessible dye that you can get with vats, and that is Murex, which is royal purple. Again, I know of one source of this in Tunisia. I have reached out to the person that is, as far as I know, the only producer of this dye stuff, and realized very quickly that I cannot afford $5,000 for a single gram of dye stuff. So, yeah, this stuff is fabulous, but yeah, it's more of an academic concern rather than actually trying to get it. So that's royal purple. It's in the exact same family as indigo, chemically speaking, but it comes from a snail rather than from a leaf. Indigo was a lot easier to get in the Americas and Murex as well. And it has been used, in fact, longer in the Americas than it has been in Europe or Asia or Africa. Significantly longer. So some of the oldest confirmed dyed fibers are dyed in indigo from Mexico. We're talking 10,000 years old. So there's a much more productive species of indigo in the Americas than you have in Europe, and I am hoping to be able to grow some. I have to check if they're invasive here or not. In case, then I won't be able to, but we'll see. And they grow, by the way, Trimarians, they grow wild in Trimaris. So you all can access it very easily over there. All right, some other dyes from around the world. This was originally slides for a class on European dyes, but I'm throwing in some dyes that I use a lot of. Okay, so wood dyes. Wood dyes are exactly what they sound like. They come from wood, And when you have heartwood that is very bright in color, it can usually dye. The great thing about this is that they're substantive dyes. They don't require a mordant. You can use a mordant anyway to brighten the color, but it's going to give you awesome colors. Brazil wood, which is not legal to use in the US, but has a mimic called sappanwood, um, is the most available one. Again, Brazil wood you're not going to find. It's legal. It's highly endangered. But sappanwood you can find, um, and it's pH sensitive, so you're going to get anything from orange to purples to pinks and very bright reds. And all you have to do is boil the chips of wood in water, throw the fiber in, and you've got crazy bright colors. Awesome stuff. This is my favorite dye by far. It's not even close. This stuff gives you, in the easiest way, the nicest colors. They last forever. You don't have to worry about mordants or extra processes. It's like boil and go. Fabulous stuff. Cromwell is the Japanese equivalent to a royal purple. Um, there's also a version of this from China. Cromwell is the European name for this type of plant. For those of you here in the Pacific Northwest, creeping Cromwell, which has those incredibly, like almost too blue to look at flowers, that creeping plant that you see in gardens all over the place. It's in the same family, not the same genus. I have it growing here, and I may dig up the roots and see if they die at all. But that's just for just to check. I don't know. I've never seen a Cromwell growing anywhere else, so I'm going to try with that. In Japan, it's called the plant itself is called shikon, and the color is murasaki, right? So both words mean, one means purple root, one means purple, and it's similar to the European root alkanet, and it gives purple colors. They're not the exact same color as you get from a royal purple, a Murex snail. They're more bluish purples, and you can get a variety depending on how you extract it. The traditional way to extract it is extremely labor intensive. It involves very, very strong men sitting in front of a vat of warm water with a bunch of chopped up roots and kneading them for 4 hours every day for several weeks. I'm not doing that. I don't have anything that it takes to be able to do that. So the way that I extract it is by soaking the roots in 70% ethanol. You can also use a very high proof alcohol. I don't drink, so I have no idea what that would be. If somebody can tell me, go ahead, tell me what a very high proof alcohol is. I don't know. But I use ethanol, 70% or higher, and it, Everclear, thank you. I have heard that. So you can use that stuff. Ethanol, it's going to give you bluer colors, not as purple, but they're still very beautiful. This is on Rainy, which is very difficult to get color into. It's similar to a linen, and it's usually used for underclothes, and it's usually white, but I can get a bluish purple onto it. Yeah, thank you, Savannah. 70% ethanol is the same as 140 proof. So you probably want something like that or more concentrated. Thank you. That is not something I would know. This is how I can get on silk. You see how it's a more bluish purple? It's not that reddish purple that you get from snails, or even as reddish as you can get out of Cromwell if you go through the long method of extraction. If you want to try it, be my guest. I would love to, trade for some of that stuff, but I don't have the time or strength to be dyeing roots for weeks at a time. Yeah, so that's Cromwell Murasaki. Lovely, amazing stuff, especially on silk. cork bark. This is my second favorite dye. It's another one where you only have to boil it, and that's it. There's no mordanting. I don't even mordant for brightness. It's already so bright that it's almost hard to look at. Again, my camera is not showing very bright colors, but see if you can see. This is on a very fine silk. The finer the fabric, the less bright the color is. So yeah, if I squish it together, you can see how very bright this is. And this is literally just grabbing the wood chips, throwing them into a boiling pot, and then letting it cool down a little bit and putting the silk in there. It is amazing colors that you can get out of it. This is usually what I do my intro dyeing classes with because it's the easiest to get anything out of. Okay, my camera no longer sees me. That's fine. So they come as chips of the outer bark of this tree, which is Philodendron amorense, which the name in Asian languages is literally yellow bark. That's the name of the thing. So you want to look for this name. The Japanese name is Kihada. You'll probably find it under the Chinese name, which I can't remember right now, but ask me if you're interested and I'll get it for you guys. Because it's also sold as Chinese medicine, and that's how I get it. I go to eBay, I look for the sellers of Chinese medicinal herbs, and that's where actually I get a lot of my dye stuff. Like a lot of dye stuff is also used in Chinese medicine, so that's where you can get it for really cheap. A lot of stuff, safflower, stuff like that, you can get for really cheap. I just realized I did not put safflower into this list, so I'm just going to talk about it. Safflower is it's a flower. It gives several different colors, and the reason I probably didn't put it here is because it's another one of those advanced dyes because it requires a multi-step extraction process. So safflower are these beautiful little petals that have mostly pink and some yellows in there, and you have to extract those two colors separately. Otherwise, you end up with not the target color you're going for. So you boil it first at a lower temperature and you extract all the yellow. And you can use that yellow if you want, but it's not going to be very good quality. Traditionally, it's discarded, but you can get a color out of it. It's going to wash out. It's not going to be very good. It is a dye. It's not a stain, but it's just not a very bright color. And then step 2 is going to be to boil at a higher, first you have to boil at a higher temperature in an acidic condition. I think the first one is in a base and the second one is an acid. So you have to change the pH of the thing as you go along. So you shift it to an acid and then you extract at a higher temperature and then you get the most amazing pink color, which is that beautiful safflower pink. What you see, the pinks you see in a lot of Japanese kimono, etc., that safflower, that's how you get those very clean, gorgeous, intense pinks. But again, it's very difficult to get. And that's not impossible, it's just labor intensive. All right. Other dyes. This I added because this is something that I've been researching the past few years. And after the move, I no longer have the plants that I was hoping to grow, but I still have seeds and I'm hoping that I can get it going in my dye garden here. But we're talking about American dyes. I'm mostly focusing on Mesoamerican and South American, particularly South American, because that's where I'm from and that's what I'm interested in. And I've only been able to dye with one of these so far, and that's koji. That's a specific species of Buddleia, which is a flower that the spikes grow a lot of little flowers in a little globe. It's used decoratively, so you can find different species of Buddleia. I don't know if this one you can find for decorative purposes, but I've gotten the exact species koji, and it dyes a beautiful yellow, very bright, very cool stuff. There's something called Dyer's Coreopsis, which is this little daisy-like flower with a red center that also give you yellows that you're dyeing directly with the petals. There's Indigofera fruticosa, which is the indigo which grows in Florida. Um, there's Indigofera guatemalensis, which gives, I think, the best indigo colors, the best bang for the weight of fiber. That's where I've gotten the highest quality indigo out of is from guatemalensis. This is what's used in Mesoamerica. Um, and it's used to this day. And I also use it to create a very specific pigment, which the recipe for it wasn't rediscovered until the 90s. And um, if anyone is very interested in pigments, I managed to get a hold of the only book that goes through the recipe. It's been out of print for decades, and it's only in Spanish, but I have it, and yeah, it works to get Maya blue. Okay, uh, and then okay, this is going to get into a another group of dyes, which are lichen dyes. So a lot of lichen will give you dyes. Usnea you can find here in the Pacific Northwest. In Florida, you're supposed to be able to find it. I can never find it there. I found it here when I came to look at the house to buy it. And that's one of the things I was like, okay, yeah, this is a sign. It's literally growing on the oak trees outside my window. As well as um, what's the other one? I have a jar of it sitting over there. Whatever. I'll get to another point. So something will give you oranges. That other one's going to give purple, like bright purple. Can't think of the name right now. Anyway, different species of it are used throughout the Americas. The one in Peru is cacasunca. Okay. And then there's another one called chilca, which is a leaf that gives a mossy green color. A lot of people think they can get green from just boiling leaves. You will not. You're going to get, at best, a light yellow, at worst, nothing at all. This is one where the leaf itself does give you a color, and it's not chlorophyll doing it. Chlorophyll is a stain. It disappears within days. It's something different within it, and I'm not haven't done enough research to be able to know what it is yet. But I have no idea where to even get this at this point. And they boil it with colpa, which is an iron salt that's found naturally in the Andes. Again, this is the same thing as copperas, and that's how you get those greener shades. Alrighty. Okay, so that's what I have here. I'm gonna do a quick jump here just to see if I missed anything. Oh, I did have, this is what safflower looks like. Did I miss any? I already have that one. Indigo. Okay, here we go. This is another of the Asian dyes, and this opens it up to a final group of dyes. So this is a pine cone formed alder, specifically Alnus firma, which grows in Asia. It might grow in some parts of North America. I'm not certain. I have a whole bag of this in the garage that I got from Japan. So yeah, at some point I'm gonna do a dye demonstration with some of these Japanese dyes that I was able to get a hold of. These gives these lovely chocolate browns. The actual dye there are tannins that we talked about as mordants earlier, but this is where you can get tannin dyes. And you're only going to get a tannin dye from a source of dye which is particularly highly intensely concentrated. These alder cones are one source. Another source is oak galls, which again I have growing right outside my window. So that's where a little wasp goes onto the oak tree. It bites in, it lays its egg, puts it in there. The tree, to protect itself, grows a little capsule around the grub, the egg. The grub comes out, eats a little bit inside, and flies away. And this ball is left behind. So the oak galls in the Pacific Northwest are very nice. The ones in Florida are not very good. I know it's because different species of oak over there, you mainly have live oak, which is not a true oak. It's oak-like. Um, and you can get some color out of it, but you're not going to get the Aleppo. Yeah, there you go. You're not going to get those Aleppo colors out of it. Yeah, the Aleppo oak galls are the best to use. Those come from um, Anatolia and the Middle East area. Fabulous. Also North Africa, I think they grow. The ones in the Pacific Northwest are somewhere in between that and live oak. They're not as good as Aleppo oak galls, but because they're much smaller, but they still are very concentrated. I've been collecting what I can. Um, I moved here too late in the year to be able to collect the good amount, but I've been collecting whatever I find. Okay, and then the great thing about tannin dyes is you get, if you dye on its own, you get browns. If you add a, um, a base, pushes it a little bit towards the yellows. It gives you more of like a light coffee brown. If you put irons, it gives you like a sepia color. If you add iron in higher concentrations, you're going to get a darker color. And this is where iron and tannin dyes together gives you black. The more iron you use, the blacker it gets, or you can get black color. And that's how you do it. And it's the exact same thing that's going to give you iron gall ink, which I make by the gallon. So you can dye with it. You do need a mordant, but you can dye with it. If you just spill it on your cloths, it'll wash away eventually because it's a stain. But if you have a mordant, it becomes a dye, and that's how you get that. I spoke a few times about adjusting pH levels. How do you do it at home? Easy. If you want an acid, use vinegar. If you want the base, use ash. Soda ash, which is sold in any store for washing. And that's exactly what they would have used in period. So go crazy. If you don't have vinegar, cut up a lemon and squeeze it in there. That's it. You don't have to push, usually, you don't have to push it to very high or very low pH. You're just shifting it towards that side. Um, okay, sorry. We are apparently at time. I talk forever, but good thing that was the last slide. So I'll stop here and I'll start taking questions for people that want to stay a little bit longer. Um, I'm free to answer any questions. And for those in Adiantium at Egil's, I'll be doing a hands-on dyeing class. And yeah, hopefully throughout the year, once my garage is set up, I will have dyeing get-togethers, informal times when people bring their stuff and we just um, yeah, I will send the presentations. I'll put all of them into a folder and I'll share that folder. I'll open it so anyone with a link can read through them. Again, some of them are not organized very well, or they're old versions of presentations I had worked on because I lost my hard drives, but
Yeah.
you know.
And I mean it when I say I could genuinely listen to you talk for hours, but I do have a
You know.
question that just
Mhm.
popped up. Um, as Laska was mentioning that it can take, giant vats, and literally a stump to dye large amounts of fabric. What do you
Mhm.
recommend for a beginner like myself who maybe would want to make a silk veil dyed with sappanwood or a silk veil dyed with cork bark?
That's what this is. These are silk handkerchiefs, but a veil would be the same. The finer the fabric, the smaller the pot you need, because you just don't need enough as much volume. So definitely silk is the easiest to dye in large quantities of fabric because it just condenses to a much smaller, say, ball of it's less weight per square meter, right? So a large pot is enough for something like that. You don't need to what we call dye on the log, where you literally have to have a log hanging over the pot, and you have to have several people constantly moving the fabric in and out of this large vat
I
to be
actually
able
saw
to.
this at Gulf Wars. I didn't know what they were doing, but I saw this at
Yes,
my first
that's
Gulf Wars this year. It makes
yeah.
sense.
I've taken part of that a few times. When I do attend Gulf Wars, I'm spending easily half or more of my time at the Textiles wet. So all those ladies know me quite well, and I love and adore them. and I love the dyeing on the log. It is so fun. It requires asbestos hands, but it's great. But if you're doing something like silk, if you're doing something like veils, you can easily do it on a kitchen stove. You just have to make sure that you're agitating it so that every bit of the fabric gets the same amount of contact to the dye stuff. So you don't want the dye stuff to all settle out. You don't want the fabric to settle out and then form layers upon itself and then resist upon itself. So you want to constantly be agitating it. You don't want air bubbles to get trapped in there. So it requires just a little bit and I'm not talking about like whipping it, right? I'm just talking about moving it around once in a while. You always want to thoroughly wet your fabric before you put it into the dye. You don't put dry fabric into the dye ever, 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 because what you end up with is patchiness. Because not all of the fiber is going to take up the fluid at the same rate. Um, and depending on the humidity of your environment, that's going to get worse or better. So I always do is I thoroughly wet over at least half an hour in very clean water if I have dry fiber, and then move it all wet into the pot from there. What that's going to do is that it's going to wick in all the dye stuff, and it's going to do it all at a high rate and therefore at the same time. So you end up with areas of the fiber that take up the dye at a lower rate than other areas. Another thing, when we're dyeing with um, skeins of fiber, you don't want this. You don't want a tightly wound piece of fiber, because what you're going to end up with is anywhere where the fiber is touching itself, it's not going to take up the dye as well. Think of it as, this needs to absorb the dye into it. So you want it to be loosely, very loosely tied together, right? This is something that I pulled out of that dye without untying it. And you can see it's very loose fibers. Wherever it's tied over here, you want the ties to be very loose. You want the fiber to be able to move back and forth, slide past that tie, right? So you want that tie to be very loose. It's going to make it more difficult to unwind everything after the fact, the looser you make it. But if you want the most even color, you want to do this. If you want perfectly even color and very large amounts of fiber, so we're not talking this, we're talking like 100 times this, then you're going to have to do a mini log where you have two sticks on top of um, a large pot. Just assume just think of my arms here as these sticks, and you're going to have to switch them in location on top of the vat constantly. So you're moving the fiber in and out of the dye pot constantly. And you're going to have to do this for like an hour, 2 hours, however much. This is when you're talking about commercial dyeing or dyeing in very large quantities for a community. Then you're doing that in order to get very large quantities of fiber dyed very evenly. And because you're constantly moving in and out, no one portion of the fiber is going to spend more time than another in the dye, and it's constantly agitated.
Well, now
So
I know that that is not something I'm going to attempt on my own,
yeah,
but maybe
that
maybe with a
most
group
people,
at some time.
that's something that you do at like a golf course where you can
Yeah,
have you can have shifts,
and
um,
that way too,
and
we
it's
can
the
have
kind of
the
thing
learning.
where you sing while you do it because it helps with keeping the time, right? Um, yeah, but for the quantities that we're talking about for things like veils, truly it's just a big pot on a stove. You throw the stuff in, you stir it every couple of minutes, and you're good to go. As long as you did all the steps correctly along the way, you'll get really nice stuff. And I've gotten really nice stuff and really crappy stuff, so I've made every mistake you can make. Um, I've even spilled vinegar all over the table, forgotten about it, and then put to dry um, the handkerchiefs on top, the silk handkerchiefs. It reactivated the vinegar on the table and ruined everything because it shifts.
No,
Yeah.
Well, I think we have one more question before. I mean, I know your time is valuable and we don't want to take too much time, but Salif Castlemere asked, if oils kind of work as a natural resist, could you
Yeah.
potentially like intentionally add oil to make a sort of tie dye?
Absolutely, and that's called batik dyeing.
Ah,
Well, there's many types, there's many traditions of this around the world. It's usually not an oil; it's usually a wax. The reason being that you can put the wax into like a pastry bag type thing and draw patterns onto the fabric, let it dry, and then that wax will protect that portion of the fabric. Then you dye and you come out with a tie dye. It's not a tie dye. There's also tie dyeing, um, shibori and such in Japan, but then this is called resist dyeing. Um, in Anatolia, I think Persia, they call it batik, and
mhm.
then in Japan they call it something else. Sorry, my brain is not working today on that. I can't remember the word for it. But if everywhere where dyeing has been done, that has been done in some way or another. Resist dyeing, whether it's usually with a wax, but sometimes it's in Japan they do it with a soy milk solution, um,
Oh,
which is also an oily substance that pushes away the dye and gives you a beautiful resist. And that's the kind of thing where you want to use the time honored methods because the problem later is getting that resist off the fabric and not having any residue. So if you do it the right way, then that's an easy process. If not, then it can be a difficult process.
we have one other really important question, I think, before it's
Mhm.
we should probably all go to
Sure.
sleep. And that was, do you recommend having separate dye pots from cooking pots?
Yes, always. And I recommend having specific, with certain dyes, always have a specific pot for it. Indigo should never be mixed in the same pot with other things. And the type of pot matters. You want usually a non-reactive pot. So that means a stainless steel pot. That means you want a aluminum pot or an enamel pot because the metals in the pot itself will react with the water, leach out metal salts, and modify the color of your yarn. That was something that Imperial was done on purpose. They didn't always know they were using aluminum. They were, they had aluminum in the pot that they were using from, incomplete metal refining processes. They use cast iron to get um, iron into it. Copper was used.
Mhm.
In fact, most of the copper dyeing wasn't done with a copper salt. It was done in a copper pot, um, that kind of thing. And then by putting in an acid, then it leaches out the copper, I think, 2+ ions, and then that will shift the color. So yes, always yes. Alaska's saying locals down to South Florida. She inherited a bunch of my pots, so I don't cook in the same pots, but I do mix for vegetable dyes. I use the same pots. I don't, as long as they're washed in between uses, it doesn't matter. It's really for vat dyes like indigo that you want a separate pot. Um, it it stains in a way that's very difficult to remove. So just do that. Any
Awesome.
other questions? All right.
Last we
So
did ask, is getting a copper pot a good way to safely use copper as a mordant?
yes, but you have to only use it for cooking. I'm sorry, don't use it for cooking. Only use it for dyeing, and you have to use some sort of acid in the dye process to leach out the copper. So it's if you have a pH sensitive dye, it's going to shift the color of it. You can post-mordant to change the color back to whatever you need, but then it's a more finicky process because you have to get the pHs right. But yes, and also you have to make sure it's like just copper, not one of those modern copper pots that have protective coverings against leaching because you actually want the leaching. So you want an old copper pot. Um, the more banged up, the better.
That makes sense. Well, thank you again so much, Master Nishigori. genuinely mean it when I feel like I could hear you talk for hours and
Yeah,
still keep learning. So genuinely, thank you so much. Your expertise is awe-inspiring, truly. And I'm probably going to be reaching out to you when I try to dye this silk. And please let us know when you have the slides ready. We'll share them on the Facebook group as well as on the event. So thank you so much for joining us.
thank you so much, and I'll send you the yeah, I'll send you the folder where I'll keep all of these. Actually, I already shared it with you. I need to add this final one in there, and then you can share that with anyone, however you prefer. I don't really use Facebook, so
Okay.
I'd rather not share it that way. If you want to copy to them and do whatever you want with them, that's fine.
Yeah,
I
of course. I'll probably
probably
share the Google Drive.